each consecutive year was worse than the one before. Constipation and being bloated and not like having the sense of unwellness or hypersensitivity to everything, light, sound. And I was experiencing symptoms just from loading the dishwasher or washing my hair. And so most of the time I would avoid just doing that, so I couldn't go outside. I just stayed inside. I was lying on the couch. You cannot deny it anymore, and you cannot hide it either, because I was ashamed that I wasn't performing as well as other people around me. So I started looking into it, and I watched the first introductory video of ANS REWIRE, and then, well, just hearing someone say something in a way that I could understand, and that I sort of, well, this makes sense, and that also gave me agency. Well, the shift started from day one. When I came to the office in November, my recovery had come so far that I no longer qualified for a diagnosis anymore, and I was just chatting with the doctor, and she was like really happy on my behalf and was really curious about what kind of program were you on?
Hi, my name is Dan Neufer. I'm the author of CFS Unraveled and the creator of the ANS REWIRE recovery program. The most damaging myth about fibromyalgia, ME, CFS, POTS, multiple chemical sensitivities and related syndromes is that just because there's no one-fit-all cure, that people can't recover their health and get their lives back. Since 2014, I have been doing interviews with people who have done just that, who fully recovered and got their lives back. And I've been sharing them from this very desk that I'm sitting at right now. If you want to learn more about recovering your health from these syndromes, click the subscribe button and make sure you click the notification icon so you get notified when I upload a new video. This interview is with Oda, who recovered from ME, CFS and POTS after 10 years of chronic illness. Oda recovered using the ANS REWIRE recovery program, and like the program encourages, she engaged in multiple strategies. I was particularly fascinated how she was drawn into the icy cold waters of Norway, and the parallels between how she did this and some of the desensitization strategies within the program. Within 3 months, she was 50% recovered and no longer qualified for a diagnosis. And after 12 months, she described herself as being fully recovered. 1.5 years after starting her recovery journey, Oda says she has never felt better in her life. So, let's get straight into it. Here's her story. Well, it's my special privilege to do another recovery interview, and this is with a person who recovered using the ANS REWIRE program. So these interviews are especially dear to my heart, and today I'm speaking with Oda from Norway. How are you doing, Oda?
Great, I'm doing great.
It's nice to be able to ask that without it being a loaded question.
Yeah.
And
it's just easy to answer.
Easy to answer, and I think your smile says it all. So, what I like to often do is I like to tell a little bit about people, about what happened, how they first got ill. Was it a long time ago that you first started to get symptoms? How long ago was that?
I'd say so, yeah. I'm 26 now, and I'd say my very beginning of my downward spiral was when I was 14 or 15 years old.
Okay. And what happened?
In the beginning, it was just the regular teenage not taking care of her health. I was in high school. I guess I was a bit lonely. I found my crowd on the internet, and I started staying up all night, chatting, playing games.
Sure.
And of course, I'd be dead tired the next day, which is very normal. But this sleep deprivation, it also led to just really frequent respiratory tract infections. I had the cold, the flu, whooping cough, bronchitis, sinus infections.
Right.
When one ended, I got another one, and so this kept on going for a few years. And I didn't think of it as fatigue or anything special. It was just I was in quite poor health, I'd
Right.
say.
What did your parents and doctors say at the time?
Well, my parents were really frustrated that I wouldn't go to bed at night, or I'd be really hard to convince to have a regular sleep schedule, and I'd sort of sneak up and be up at night.
Right.
And so, of course, that was terrible for them, and they were worried about my recurring illness. And the doctors, I went through the regular
Checkups.
tests and blood work and everything. It was just everything was normal. I was just having these infections. And yeah.
Well, it's kind of a bit of a curse of the generation, isn't it? It's
Sorry?
a bit of a curse of your generation in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
The allure of the internet, online communities, they can be wonderful, but also they can be unhealthy. And we crouched over a computer in the middle of the night, and it's easy to just want to keep going.
Yeah, and especially for an immature mind.
That's right. Yeah.
In the middle of, I was in the middle of my teenage years when I started having these habits, and I didn't have the maturity to understand sort of the consequences of my actions. I was just doing my thing, you know.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess the thing is, see, if you catch up with someone face to face, their mum will kick you out, like at 9 o'clock or whenever, or 10 o'clock, right?
Yeah, it's regulated.
But how can you regulate someone's phone, that they're sneaking into the bedroom?
Yeah. I bet it's even worse now, because back then we didn't have smartphones. Teenagers didn't have smartphones, but now, you can lie in bed and there's just no. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's funny. 10 years and you're old. Back then, how quick it goes. Right?
I know. I feel like young and old at the same time, just because the development is just going so fast.
The pace of change. Absolutely. Okay, so all right. So you're a bit sickly. You're run down because you're not getting enough sleep. But when does this turn into something else? What happens? At what age did you go, hang on, this is getting worse? This is.
Yeah. It's this inexplicable sort of frightening part of it started when I was maybe 18, 19 years old. And so I'd graduated from school, and it had been these years, right? Maybe 3-4 years where I was frequently ill and not getting enough sleep, and struggling with participating in just everyday school and extracurricular activities. But then when I had graduated, I came back to Norway. I'd been abroad for the last 2 years of high school. And I just felt really tired. I was fatigued. And I had POTS syndromes. So I'd get really lightheaded. And I couldn't stand upright for a prolonged period of time. I had to sit down, and I was just unable to be standing.
What would happen if you stayed standing?
Well, it wasn't dangerous. It's not. I never passed out, but I just got so tired, and my heart started racing. The longer I tried to sort of fight it, if I had to stay standing.
Right.
And I started sensing. I started being very aware of this. These symptoms.
And then what happened? Did you go to a doctor or?
Yeah. Oh yeah. At that time, this kept on for maybe a year, and during that year, I also developed really what felt like really unregulated blood sugar. I'd go out of the door and just do regular errands, and then boom. It felt like my blood sugar just dropped, and I'd get shaky, and all I could think about was just getting home. And sometimes And this also got worse if I hadn't eaten for a while. So that's why and it probably had something to do with blood sugar, but it was also much more. And I'd throw up because I was just so
Unwell.
shaking and so unwell. And so I went to the doctor for this because that really started to get really scary. This is normal. I thought something is wrong with me, and I went to the doctor, and she couldn't help me. She just sort of brushed it off because it didn't seem really serious or anything.
What about the tachycardia symptoms, the heart symptoms? Did they check that out? Did they investigate that?
No, because I wasn't aware of it. Sort of. I just said I was tired and I had to sit down. I got dizzy. Wasn't able to stand upright.
Isn't it interesting? We first start to experience symptoms. Later on, we know exactly what we were having, but at the time, it's hard sometimes to connect and evaluate and communicate what you're going through. You just know something's wrong, and it's really quite something. I mean, given the fact that you'd been sickly for 4 or 5 years. For you then to say, oh, something is really wrong, it must have been pretty bad. You know what I mean? It's not like you would have just been having a bit of a sore throat. So, okay, but then what happened? I mean, I imagine, what did it keep going? Did you get more symptoms? Did you see another doctor?
Yeah, well, I had really like this achiever mindset, and I was really it was important to me to achieve and to be sort of up there in the top performers, and so I just sort of clenched my teeth and tried to do whatever it is I wanted to do. But of course, I was fatigued, and I wasn't able to participate as much as I would. So I pushed myself really hard, and got worse and worse, basically. So this just kept on going until 2017. Each consecutive year was worse than the one before. So I was just worse. I had less energy or less ability to do the stuff that I had done before each year.
And then, did you stay connected with the doctor? I mean, at what stage did they then diagnose you with POTS? Did they diagnose you with CFS? What did they say?
No, I thought it was in 2015. So this had been going on for quite a few years by then. And in 2015, I was really down in the dumps, and I was depressed and wasn't able to do anything. Basically, I was studying, but I didn't go to school. And so I went to a doctor to get my blood work done, and just what's wrong with me. And it turned out.
Is that right?
Yeah, 2015.
So at this stage, you're how old are you then? That's like 22. So you must have been sick for about 3-4 years. Yeah. Okay.
But during those 3-4 years, they were sort of the best years of my illness, right? So the worst had yet to come. And so it was just inhibiting me from being sort of my most active self. But I was still doing stuff. I was still studying and still participating in things. I was just really tired all the time, and had these symptoms, bodily symptoms as well. But then it just went downhill, and I went to the doctor because I was depressed. I wasn't participating. I felt really, really tired, and so now I couldn't fit my situation into sort of this narrative of I'm sort of like a weakly person. I'm a person who needs to sort of be protected. This is just who I am, and I'm just a bit less strong than others, or if you get what I mean. But this time I realized that, wow, I'm sick. I'm ill.
You can't talk it away anymore.
Sorry?
You can't talk it away. You can't justify it or rationalize it. It's like it suddenly hits you, doesn't it?
Yeah. It was.
What was it that made you that made you suddenly go, hang on a sec, I'm really ill. This is something. Normal. This is not normal. What happened? What was that?
It was gradual. I'd become concerned about health, and because my health was bad, so it sort of became an obsession of mine, and I became really interested in nutrition and supplements and all that kind of stuff. Sort of, is there something I can just put into my body to make my spirits rise high? And but of course there was nothing. But in exploring and in reading, I sort of came to the realization that I wasn't well. Obviously, but it turned out with the blood work that I had hypothyroidism, which probably came because of it's autoimmune hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, and so it probably came as a result of just this really stressful situation that my body was in. That's my hypothesis anyway. It's just my layman's hypothesis.
Yeah.
But I can say for sure that I did not have it several years earlier. So this was something that developed during the time that I started getting these fatigue and bodily symptoms.
Yeah.
So
your doctor
and so of course then,
with that?
Yes, I do have hyperthyroidism now, and so it's something that I take thyroxine. Is that what you said? Yeah. So I take that every day now. But at the time, then that was my explanation. Wow, okay, I'm hyperthyroid. That's why I'm fatigued all the time, and so that became another obsession. That I had to find the right dose of medicine, and then I would be, or the right kind of medicine. Then I would be healthy again, and I would feel great.
Yeah. So tell me, when did you reach your low point? When was your
my low point?
When was your symptoms at their worst, and what was that like?
That was in the first part of 2017, the middle of 2017.
Right. And so what kind of symptoms did you have besides the fatigue and the POTS symptoms?
Well, I guess I had really just really dysregulated body. So my digestion wasn't working as well as it should have.
Yeah.
And so I had digestive complaints symptoms. And
was it like constipation or diarrhea, or did you get pain?
Yeah, constipation and being bloated.
Yes.
And not like having the sense of unwellness, like that there's something about it. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. The reason I know that now is because I don't have that anymore. So I know that something was off.
Yeah.
It was just this hypersensitivity to everything, light, sound, everything, any sort of sensory
stimulus
would just put me over the top.
Yeah.
And so at my worst, I couldn't really. I was anticipating my symptoms, and I was experiencing symptoms just from loading the dishwasher or having or washing my hair, and so most of the time I would avoid just doing that, so I couldn't go outside, or if I did, I knew I'd be tired. So of course I did sometimes, but really usually I just stayed inside. I was lying on the couch. Yeah,
couch bound. And then, I mean, what are you still speaking with your doctors? I mean, you're on thyroid medication. Did they say? I mean, what did they say? I mean, this is not normal with somebody who's just got hypothyroidism, who's taking medicine.
Right. Well, in the time after my diagnosis, I tried. I switched doctors a couple of times just because of I was moving and also just to try to see if there was someone who could give me the right protocol. But I wasn't that much in touch with my doctors. What happened was that in the end of 2016, I moved to a completely different part of the country, and so I just tried to sort of again clench my teeth and do my thing. And me and my ex-boyfriend, we had bought a house and moved to this completely new part of the country, or a different part of the country that was new to us, and we didn't have any contacts there. So we worked hard to establish ourselves in the community. And I worked part-time. I couldn't work full-time because I was too tired for that. But I worked part-time. And I was really pushing myself to make this change in our lives work out. And we were also trying to renovate our house, but we didn't do much of that. And so that was the final push that really got me over the edge, and
led to being couch bound.
Completely,
So then, did you have to give up your part-time work?
Yes.
What was that like, that moment? I mean, how do you make that decision?
Horrible. It was horrible.
Once again, no denying that you're ill then, right? It's interesting, the stories, we try and rationalize it. But yes. You know.
I'll just do this, and I'll just keep on going. And then suddenly, you cannot deny it anymore, and you cannot hide it either, because I was ashamed that I wasn't performing as well as other people around me. So I wouldn't really reach out to people. I would just sort of internalize it and just keep on doing my thing and not talk to people about it. But in June 2017, I was really lucky, because when I was at the end of my rope, the school semester was ending, and I was working part-time in school and in kindergarten. And so that aligned really well. So when I went to my doctor to get medical leave, then, is that what you call it? Medical leave? Then then the school semester was also ending, so it sort of worked out nicely. But it was horrible. Because I was really depressed.
I mean, if you go to the doctor and you're getting medical leave, did he not seek to give you a diagnosis or?
Yes, at that time. Yeah. At that time, I reached out to my family and I said, "I'm not well. Something is wrong, because I'm just not able to exert myself, and I'm not able to do the stuff that I'm supposed to do, like just have a regular job and
like wash your hair,
just do it." And wash my hair.
I solved that in my own way, but you know, we all get through this illness in our own strategy. When I started with the illness, I had full head of hair. You know what I mean? So you know.
Whoa. And so my dad, he suggested that, wow, this sounds like ME/CFS. Let's try and like look into that. And so when I went to my doctor, I suggested that. When I went to my doctor the first time, I was just bawling and I can't do this. I don't know what's wrong, but just I need a leave. I just really need a break. And so I got the break, and then when I came back to the office, I suggested that, wow, I would like to be referred for
a specialist,
seeing if I have a specialist, seeing if I have ME/CFS.
Okay. And then what did
the doctor said? Well, sorry.
And what happened there with the specialist?
Well, this is where the story starts, right? Because at this point I was researching. My dad was researching, and I was looking up like CFS treatment, like Googling, right? CFS.
Is this before you saw the specialist or after?
This is before.
Right. Okay.
And so this is June or July, beginning of July 2017.
Yeah.
And then I searched, then I Googled CFS recovery. And then, you know, a really great page came up in one of the top hits, and that was CFS Unraveled. And so I started looking into it, and I watched just the first introductory video of ANS REWIRE, and then, well, just hearing someone say something in a way that I could understand, and that I sort of, well, this makes sense, and that also gave me agency. That well, the shift started from day one, and so to sort of jump over the whole ANS REWIRE part, then I was referred to a specialist, but of course there's a waiting list. So This is in July, and I got my appointment in November. And when I came to the office in November, my recovery had come so far that I no longer qualified for a diagnosis anymore. And I was just chatting with the doctor, you know, and she was like really happy on my behalf and was really curious about what kind of program were you on. And so I gave her all the info and everything, and we were just having like this really nice chat. And
yeah. That's one way to go about it. Did she recognize? Did she say, "Oh yeah," by what you said that you had CFS? Did she give you a diagnosis, or did she just?
No. I mean, my general practitioner who I went to the first time, of course, he put down ME CFS or whatever it was in the in my journal, but when I was with the specialist, of course, she couldn't say anything about like me being sick, because I wasn't sick anymore. But she did acknowledge my journey and that it was sort of like that my recovery was real, which is of course nice to hear.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, it's kind of it's kind of strange, you know, and the sad thing is that this strange story is the normal way that people have, you know, like, you know, ideally we'd all like to just go to a doctor and get diagnosed straight away and recognize what's going on, and instead most of us tend to sort of just have a mediocre, confusing experience and just push on and kind of never acknowledge ourselves that we're sick. Because if the doctor doesn't say you're sick or doesn't make a diagnosis, you kind of think, well, maybe I'm just not feeling good, until we get to a point where we can't wash our hair or we can't leave the house, and then suddenly it's there. You know, for somebody who hasn't had chronic fatigue syndrome, I mean, how would you describe the fatigue? I mean, what did it feel like at your worst?
Well, it just envelops you, and my perception was fatigued. So it's not just that I'm the person that I am today and I was feeling really tired, because I can feel tired today. I can go for a really tough workout, or I can do stuff that's exhausting, and that's normal. But I will still be the person I am now. Be the person I am now, and just feel tired. But at that time, my perception was different. So I just felt really ill, and my thoughts were slower. My thoughts were more limited, and so I didn't have the same
brain fog symptoms.
Brain fog symptoms, which I didn't really recognize. That I didn't identify that much with having brain fog, because I felt that my mind was, you know, working, but I didn't read books. I love reading. I read like a book a week, but at that time I didn't read anything. And of course the physical, like the bodily fatigue is just so extreme that any small exertion, just any small raise in heart rate or pushing against something, just would knock me down and would make me feel like I just run 5K.
Now, how long would it knock you down for?
Usually the rest of the day, and then the next day I would just wake up. I mean, just as tired as I had been the morning before. So my baseline level of energy would never get to normal. I would always be below normal every day, but then I could go even lower than that if I exerted myself. Yeah.
Did you find you'd get other symptoms like sore throats or swollen glands or like feverish or anything like this?
I didn't have that much like immune system symptoms.
Yes.
Yeah,
no. So it was mainly the gut, the overwhelming fatigue, and then also the sensitivities to the lights and sounds and all of that.
Mainly.
So let's talk a little bit about your Okay, so you found this program. You tried all these things. Obviously, it resonated with you.
Yeah.
You know, I guess one of the things I notice about you telling your story is this lack of, I don't want to say acceptance, but recognition of what you were going through at the time. I can see now that in hindsight, you can see it, but it sounds to me like at the time you didn't. And it's
No.
a bit that story because you've been sick already for like a decade, right? So how would you know? It's like that story about the frog, you know, when he jumps into the boiling water, he jumps straight out, right? But when you just heat the water up slowly, he cooks. And
Yeah.
I might just get you to see if you can move your microphone a little bit.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's just rubbing against your jumper,
Yeah. Sorry.
and then it makes a bit of a noise.
Like this, has it been like that for a long time?
No, just
Sorry.
every once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's that story about the frog, and I can very much sense that, you know, with like the brain fog, it's like you're normal. There's nothing wrong with your brain. You don't know, because if it happens overnight, you go, oh my God, my brain's not working. I can't concentrate. I can't think. I'm in a fog, right? But when sort of over 10 years, just, you know, so clearly you recognized it at the other end, right? So as you start to become better, you would have started to notice just what was wrong beforehand.
Yes.
What was that like?
Well, the getting better, I realized how ill I'd been, and that there would always be a level of well-being beyond sort of what I could imagine. And so
Right.
Every time I got better during my recovery, I'd redefine my definition of wellness, because I knew that, well, if I got here, I can get even further. And so the point I was at before must have been really low.
Yeah.
No, it was just a really great experience.
Yes.
Life-changing, of course.
Yeah. So you especially like starting to recognize that you had brain fog and that you were now able to engage, was, I guess, was it a shock? Was it a surprise, or did you just suddenly go, "Ooh, this is nice"? Or, you know, what's that like?
It was a bit like ooh, because I started becoming curious again, and I started sort of opening up my mind, and this was all a part of the process of also getting to know myself better, and understanding in what ways my personality was had imbalances, and sort of getting to the root of things, because there's almost always a layer that you can always peel off a layer and get even deeper. And so I started opening up my mind and becoming more curious, and started reading, and sort of and I wanted to do new things with my life. And suddenly I realized that now the vision I have of the future is different than the vision I've had previously, and I finally started to believe in the future.
This must have been,
because my mind sort of just opened up.
Yeah, this must have been, well, and different possibilities. I mean, if you can do more than wash your hair, then maybe you can do something else in life. It must have been confusing for the people around you, no? After knowing you all these years, and then you're suddenly becoming energized, dynamic. It's like, what are they thinking? What are they saying to you?
Well, the situation I was in at the time was that I was with my ex-boyfriend, and so during my process of recovery, I realized that this relationship no longer gave me, or was no longer beneficial to me, and so that was a really tough choice. I had to make a choice, because it was either to not recover fully and stay in the relationship, or to actually make a change in my life, a difficult change. I don't like conflict. I don't like you know, the difficult parts of social relationships. But but I let that relationship go, and that was a really huge part of my recovery also, making that huge step. And so because we were no longer compatible. I had changed.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's like a different person. How do you think you changed? Besides the energy and the dynamics and all of that,
I started seeing that some parts of me that I'd identified really strongly with, and that attitude that I had to those parts, that maybe that wasn't as beneficial as I'd previously thought. And so my identity was really centered around achievement, intelligence, being really good at stuff, not admitting to a weakness or being vulnerable, and so on. And of course,
that sounds like a tough job when you're on the couch and can't wash your hair.
It was just the clash of two completely conflicting sort of ways of being, and so the being like that was just impossible. And during the program, I was also I was made aware of this, and I thought I want to have a more balanced personality. I want to be able to experience being vulnerable and experience appreciating other things in life than just being smart or accomplishing things, because that's empty. There's so many other things.
So, people listening who don't know what ANS REWIRE is, I mean, you're talking about these changes in personality and balancing personality and changing this person, but hang on, I mean, this kind of sounds like you're saying it's a psychological illness. How does that work? I mean, what would you say to them? I mean, how would you describe what the ANS REWIRE program is, or what you did to recover in a way that they can understand?
Well, I think what I did to recover was that I had a shift in perspective. Just that the symptoms that I was experiencing was not from some external cause over which I had no control, but that I allowed myself to think that I was part unlucky, but also partly responsible for getting better. And so if I was to recover, then I would have to take an active part in that recovery. I would have to be one of the moving forces of that.
Yes. And this is the problem, isn't it? When you're sick and you can't, I'm sorry to keep going back to washing the hair. I guess I'm obsessed with hair. But
it was horrible. It's just like really greasy.
but the thing is, like, if you can't do some of the basics, like making, like looking after yourself in your own home or leaving the home, how are you supposed to get well? I mean, it seems like such a difficult thing to do. How are you supposed to take responsibility? You got no energy to do anything. So now you have been on medication and things like this, and you tried supplements and diets. Nothing had really worked. So you go into the ANS REWIRE program. So for someone who's in the program, I mean, what kind of things did you do? I mean, did you do physical strategies? Did you see a doctor? Or what did you do?
I changed the way I related to my symptoms. So that I'd say that's the main part. But really, in practice, I watched the videos, and I put my full faith in the program, and I think that's really important. And when you say that, you sound like this crazy, overzealous cult follower, because if you're ill and if you're not recovering, you're just not doing it well enough, and you're not being sort of in with the program. But I really do think that it's super important to have faith, because faith is hope, and hope will give you a profound shift in how you relate to your illness. And so I went all in, and I meditated daily to calm my arousal and to give my brain a chance to make positive changes in the way it responded to
Stimulus.
to symptoms, basically. Stimulus, yeah.
Okay. And I trust you obviously kept taking a thyroxine medication.
Absolutely, yeah.
Did you make other changes to your diet, to supplements? Did you use any other physical strategies?
Not in the sense of changing anything when I started the program, because I had already been obsessed with diet and nutrition and everything like that for several years already. So if there was something I could do on that front, I was already doing it, I'd say.
Okay.
And so
you had all the foundations
I probably
in place.
Well, so just a few of them on the diet side. Yeah.
Okay. And if you were to if someone were to ask you and say, oh, so, you know, ANS REWIRE, I mean, so what's causing the illness then? I mean, how does what you're talking here, how can that possibly make you well when, you know, I'm physically ill? I mean, you ended up with issues with your hormones and you know, lights and energy and your digestion. I mean, none of that is imagined. That was all real. So how would you explain to them the theory behind this?
Well, the way I've understood it during my recovery and also after, I've been interested in sort of figuring out what was this thing. Well, these symptoms, they are, whether you like it or not, they're created by the body, the brain. So if my heart is, my brain controls my heart rate, and if my heart is pounding faster, that's because my brain is sending signals to make it pound faster, and so on. If something is dysregulated, then it means that signals are being sent from my brain that are making it dysregulated. So if the problem exists in the brain or in the nervous system rather, then that's also where the cure is. Changing the way these patterns express themselves. And the wonderful thing is that you can do that through conscious intervention.
Yeah, so and many people talk about the whole psychological side, and so I love the way you chose your words there, because it's not psychological, is it? It's
no.
It's a physical illness, and it's not.
Yes.
It's not like you're depressed and, you know, therefore you're making your heart go racing. I mean, you couldn't do that if you tried, right?
No, I couldn't.
You know, you literally couldn't do that if you tried. So it's not people's faults. It's just that the nervous system basically goes havoc, and the opportunities, they can be psychological and they can be physical strategies. Lots of things can impact the nervous system, which is why people recover in so many different ways. But understanding how is, I think, really, really important. I sense that was clearly when you speak about faith and confidence, really, in a process. It makes it a lot easier when we're not dominated by feeling fear, because it's a pretty scary experience. I mean, standing up, your heart is racing, can't get off the couch, can't, you know, you have to go to the doctor and say, I can't work anymore, and you're like 23 or 24 years old. I mean,
I was terrified.
It's you know, you're supposed to do that like someone in your 70s, maybe. Yeah. Did you find that you had setbacks with your recovery?
Yeah, I've had setbacks in the sense that I've sort of plateaued and then not experienced that much, not experienced progress for a while, and then of course whatever symptoms I experienced, that would be sort of disconcerting and not very encouraging.
How to keep your faith, right?
Yeah, I tried.
So what happens? What did you do in those moments when those demons come to you?
I went back and viewed the videos in the program, and also just I had like this little Dan on my shoulder, and what would Dan say about this? Well, he'd say that this is just a completely normal part of the recovery phase, and just take it in your stride. Be kind to yourself. Keep on doing the stuff that got you here, because it will keep on getting you further.
Do you think that the little Dan voice, do you think that morphed into your own voice?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Now it's my own voice.
Yeah.
When I talk to myself now, I'm sorry to say that you're not as present with me now as you were then, but now it's just me.
It's just you.
And so
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. What was the biggest challenge for you with the program and recovery?
My biggest challenge. Let me think about that for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Maybe you can prompt me, like, or come with some suggestions of what might have been my challenges, because I can't really.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I asked it. It's not something that we have to have an answer for, you know. And then perhaps there's a lesson in that, you know, in the fact that you didn't feel overly challenged. I mean, clearly you've had things that were difficult. You know, you talked about changing, you know, your whole identity, your whole personality. You had all those fears, but you know, yet you don't feel obliged to mention them. It's almost as if you, I don't know, you just kind of worked around it. You know, I don't get the sense that you did overwhelm. Would you say that's true, or am I misreading that?
That I did. I didn't get overwhelmed by the program. No. But that's I was I was really lucky in where I was in my life, because I could take medical leave and just double down on the program and focus entirely on that. And I did. That was the only thing I did. Besides just really small things otherwise in my life.
So I mean,
my challenges were the illness, not the program.
Yeah. Okay, and I like that. That's a great way to look at it. Was there, like, you know, at what stage did you sort of go, oh my God, this is really working? or did you go at some stage, oh my God, I'm actually recovered now. Am I recovered? Is this what recovered is? I mean, did you go through that?
I felt that it was really working just a few weeks in, and I knew that, wow, because I did the video diary.
Yes.
And one of the prompts for doing the diary is how much faith do you have in the program and that you will recover. And in the beginning, I definitely have faith, and but I didn't have any proof. But I had faith. But after actually getting proof that this might work, and that this might be making me a lot better, then I couldn't stop smiling when doing my video diary. Like, this is going to work. I have 100% confidence that this will take me all the way. Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Is there anything else you did during your recovery? I mean, obviously we have the program, the rewiring, the diet, you know, all the different elements. Did you do any of the shaking techniques? Did you do the postural rewiring? Was that a big part of you? Did you get any other physical treatments from a doctor or acupuncture? Was there anything else you did as part of your recovery?
I did yoga. I started doing yoga. Just with an app on my phone. It's called Yoga Studio or something like that. And so I did small yoga sessions in my living room. That was really helpful, because it's this really calm physical movement that just gets your body flowing, and so that was great. I swam in the ocean. And so this was northern Norway, so the ocean is pretty cold. And so most of the time I was basically taking ice baths, right?
Yeah.
not quite. But it was really refreshing, and it really helped me. It was one of those physical things that I found really
interesting,
really beneficial. Yeah, surprisingly beneficial.
Interesting.
And otherwise, I I didn't use it as a part of my recovery, but someone I know does something similar to a somatic. What do you call it?
Somatic experiencing.
So, somatic experiencing, yes. And I had a session of that, and that was really great. So if anyone has access to that kind of practitioner, I would really recommend it, because it felt fabulous. It just had this really great impact on my body and my feelings at the same time.
So what was that like? Can you sort of explain that to people, what you do there with somatic experiencing and
this particular kind, I think it's called Thomas Hanna. I'll have to look that up, and maybe I can send you something afterwards.
Yeah.
This kind of somatic experiencing, it was oriented towards. It's really hard to explain. I don't really have the words for it, but it's sort of integrating your movements, moving really slow, so that the the map you have in your brain of your body and your muscles gets more detailed, sort of. And it, instead of being like a head attached to some sort of physical thing, you sort of become a person inside a body,
right,
or a person that is a body.
Okay, interesting. And
I don't know. It's just it's great.
That's a great way of explaining it. And did you do that often? Did you just do it once, or?
No, this I just did once, but I
You found it helpful.
I did the yoga, which has similar benefits.
Yeah. So you probably took the lessons on board from that experience and continued to apply them, by the sound of it, with the yoga. Look, I might just take a few moments just to explore the swims, because I think it's actually interesting, especially given the fact that it's very cold water. Tell me, what kind of benefit did you have from going into these? And I mean, did you find it was stressful going into that cold water? Did you react? Does your body go? Because we're talking about sensory, having difficulties with sensory stimulus. Yes. You couldn't handle lights and sounds and all of these things, which is classic in CFS. And then you're going into cold water, right? I mean, how did you react? How did this work?
I think I already had some experience with swimming in cold water from when I was going to school in Canada. I'd done it a bit.
Yes.
And I enjoyed it. So, and I think I have, I think I'm able to sort of withstand colder water than a lot of people. But I think it's an attitude thing as well, that you sort of try not to get scared from the cold. So,
it's not that different than the rewiring that we're talking about, or when the tachycardia comes up, right? And you embrace it. So instead of fighting it,
you embrace it, because you go into the water and it's just shocking, and immediately your diaphragm just clenches up, and you can't breathe, and you start hyperventilating, and your heart starts racing, and your skin starts to feel really cold and tingly, and then after a while it just starts to hurt really much. And so it's a really shocking experience.
But see, on paper, that doesn't sound like a great thing for someone with CFS, because you can't hack when somebody yells at you, or if there's too many lights, or people can't stand even a slight temperature change. So and did you have problems with temperature changes too, in general, outside of this?
Well, I had a dysregulated body temperature, so I had really cold extremities and problems with just like regulating my body temperature.
Did you have any pain?
And I got cold a lot.
Yeah, you got cold a lot as well, generally speaking. And did you have pain at all during your years of illness?
Only headaches, and so only just like a couple of times or a few times that I had physical bodily pain.
Right.
But otherwise, it was more like of a really like a lot of tension in my body.
Yeah.
And a lot of
And so with all of that, we go into the water, and it seems like the worst thing in the world to do, right? No?
Yeah, it does. But it's paradoxical. But I think just like that it's so extreme makes it easy, because then it's not like everybody reacts when they go into cold water. So it doesn't seem not normal or unnatural to have this really extreme bodily reaction to it. Whereas if you're being overstimulated by bright lights and everybody else is fine, then you start, oh, what's wrong with me? And this is worrisome. But in the water, you sort of have to accept that this is the way it's going to be, and you are going to feel these symptoms, and you just have to accept them.
That's very interesting.
And afterwards, I just feel serene, like serenity.
Yeah.
It will just feel wonderful.
So you say you have to accept it, because if you don't accept it and you go in and it's so cold, it's like if you don't accept it, you're going to go crazy, right? I mean, like this is so terrible on you that if you don't,
you just go right up.
You can't handle that, right? So the only way you can handle it is to submit to that experience of the cold, and instead of fighting that cold and bracing against it and trying to push it out, you kind of go, I submit. You take over my body, and I can't do anything about it, right? You relax.
That's really, really well put. That's the way I feel it is.
By the way, I don't do cold water swimming at all. And so I'm wondering if people can recognize how this is actually quite similar to the neurological training and brain training strategies that we're teaching you inside the ANS REWIRE program. It's kind of like it's like rewiring on steroids, because you're being forced to rewire.
You are either you sort of say, I can't stand this, I'm gonna get out of the water, and this is frightening, this cold water is harmful to me. But when you're on land and you get these kinds of symptoms, there's nowhere to go because you're in your body. But in the water, you sort of have the option to train, to exercise your skill at accepting it, because you have the option of going somewhere. You can go on land and get warm and dry, but you can also stay in the water and accept
it. So then how did that impact you? I mean, first time you did it, was there a shift? Was there something that happened? Or was it a regular thing? I mean, you didn't make a big deal out of it. You just mentioned it. So I'm just trying to explore it, because I don't know.
I really... I felt great after doing the cold water swims, and this was when I was almost at my worst. So I had that sort of like this. I can't work, I can't do this and this and this, but I can shock myself in cold water. What is this? Why do I feel better after swimming or just being in the cold water? And so I started doing it. I tried doing it every day, but it lowers your body temperature, so that it wasn't
not ideal
sort of
with
sustainable to do.
Not ideal with hypothyroidism, is it? Yeah.
Well, that's regulated with the medication, so I don't have any hypothyroid problems.
Fair enough.
Luckily. But I tried doing it regularly on a weekly basis, because I enjoyed it so much, and that became an important part of like being active and starting to enjoy more activity was just knowing that I can do this, and a lot of people can. Like it's hard, but I've done it, and it became like the source of confidence and trust in my body that I could handle stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I found that extremely interesting. So look, how long did it take you to make a full recovery?
It sort of depends on what you define as a full recovery. I'd say now it's 100%, and I'm so happy to say that. But I've been symptom-free for a long time now.
Yeah,
I've not had problems with tachycardia, POTS, fatigue, anything like that. But so try to break it down. I was maybe 50-60% recovered just after a few months.
Yeah, like 3 months.
And
4
then
months.
3-4 months.
Yeah.
3. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that when I came to the doctor's office, I couldn't get a diagnosis right, and I didn't want one. But because I had recovered from the physical symptoms so much.
So even the tachycardia had stopped at this stage?
No, well, it's not like everything had stopped. It's just that I could be a lot more active.
Yeah.
I wasn't as sick, as ill. Yeah. But then, sort of getting back into the world from not having engaged fully with the world for such a long time, and also having like these root issues of anxiety and that kind of thing. I've had to work on that and gradually increase my confidence in being a part of the greater world, with all its challenges and all its all the things that you have to do to have like a normal existence.
Yes.
So I started studying, but I didn't study like full time. But now I do. Yeah. So I took things gradually. So I'd say maybe about a year. Maybe it took about a year for me to recover enough to say that I'm fully recovered now.
Yeah.
And then 1.5 years to where I am today, to say that I'm so much better off now that I've never been better in my entire life, even before I started identifying as having like being sick in some way.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So really, it took a year to become symptom free, but there is still a shift in vitality, isn't it? Like you can
yes,
be
that's a good word.
Free, but then and people often describe this. Go, yeah, I'm 100% recovered, and then I speak with them 3 months or 5 months later, and they go, all right, well now I'm like 120% recovered. And it's like not that you were sick per se, but now you have more energy, and you don't know what is full energy until you have more, because you haven't had it. You haven't had it, right? No. You haven't had it since your childhood. So that is really quite a typical sort of experience. And but I think having that shift in those first 3 or 4 months certainly strikes me as having been very important for you, because it gave you the confidence that even though it took a year to become symptom free, you had a strong sense of confidence because you had a big enough shift, and not everyone has that. Some people take a while, but I think I always encourage people to seek that initial shift, because I think it's when you get that you know you're on your way.
Yes. Yes. Because when I started getting better, I knew that it would just keep on going. So even though wasn't super happy about not being able to engage in everyday activities, I knew that, well, at least I'm better than I was, and if I just give this process more time, then I'll get even better.
And I think it's really interesting how you described it as, like growing, not to have anxiety and to be able to do things and to engage in things. I know that everyone with CFS knows exactly what you're talking about, and everyone without CFS is probably looking like this, because like, what do you mean? And it's not like whether you can or can't do it. Of course you could have done it, but what were the consequences of doing it, you see? And and I think this is really where the recovery can be measured. So we can live in this bubble where we don't do all those things, and you're feeling pretty good, like even symptom free. But is that recovered? And I would say no, it's not recovered, because if you're symptom free, but then if you go and do go socializing and camping on a weekend and whatever it is that you do, and then you get sick, well then you're not recovered, right?
Yeah.
So so it is that building of, I feel well, I'm symptom free, but you keep growing your engagement in life until you get to a point where, well, I'm doing everything everyone else is doing. In fact, maybe I'm doing a little more, and that's really that journey. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That just this feeling of expansion, and that my engagement with the world is expanding, and I'm getting to my natural limits, or it feels sort of strange to say, but uh, at some point you will sort of become the. I don't believe in this essential self, and that you just have to find it or something. I think the self is something that develops through what you do and your interaction with your environment. But I think I'm expressing more of that essential quality now. That that the reasons that I perhaps choose not to engage in something is that, well, I'm enjoying something else.
Yeah.
I'm an introverted person. I like reading books. I like staying home Saturday night. I'm not into partying and that kind of stuff. But it's not like I'm not going to parties because if I did, I would become ill or something.
Yeah.
It's just because I enjoy doing the things that I choose to do.
Yeah. Having said all that, I mean, have you had particular experiences that you go, wow, I can't believe I'm doing this. This is real proof that I'm really well, that I don't have CFS anymore. Like, were there particular moments? Because how long ago would you say it is now that you've been recovered? Well, it's 1.5 years now since you started the program. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, especially in the last 6 months, have you had some experiences of going, wow, I can't believe I'm doing this?
Well, just I'm studying full time now, and when I started in the program that I'm in, we had these 2 weeks of getting to know each other and everything. And as I said, I'm not a very social person, or not a very extroverted person, and I went to parties almost every night, and I stayed up late, and I was doing all the things, drinking alcohol and everything, and eating absolutely horrendous food, and just doing all the things that I shouldn't do, but that was exactly what I was supposed to do, right? It was. I was so happy that I could engage in that sort of thing without being worried at all, or having any reason to worry.
Do you think that was an important part of your recovery, to actually do terrible things like this, the wrong things, and to come out the other end? Do you think that was important for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been really important to me to do stuff that I'm not supposed to do, so that I don't have this feeling of like, oh, I have to watch out so that I don't do X or don't do Y.
Yeah.
And so, that's been really important. Also with diet and stuff, I used to be super concerned about everything, basically.
Because it had an impact.
But now I just, because it had an impact. But sometimes also because that's just, I thought it had an impact.
Yeah.
Like I had read someplace that this and this is bad for you, and this and this is good for you.
Yes. So you can go beyond what we experience. It can become fear-based, right? Because you don't know what's going on. All you know is you feel terrible. And someone says, well, if you eat this, you get sick. And it's like, well, maybe that's true. I mean, you don't know. All you know is you feel sick. So surely you just go, well, I'll try not to do that. I'll try not to eat that. And you can become obsessive with that, can't you?
Yeah, so I became really strict, but now I've sort of gone the other way. Like I don't care. I've become much more laid back than I used to be. So like I eat whatever, like this and this. I'm trying to sort of rein that in a bit, because it's having impact on my waistline. But that sort of makes a point that I don't really care anymore, and it's wonderful to be able to not care.
Yeah, no, that is awesome. Listen, I guess what I would like to say is probably for people, anyone who's listening, what would you like to say to them? What would be your best piece of advice to people who are still sick? And if you want to split that between people who are in the program and people who are out of the program, that's fine. Or if you have one message to everyone, that's okay too. Whatever comes to you. But I guess I just wanted to give you that opportunity to maybe reflect for a moment, and if there's anything you'd like to share.
I think my advice, or not my advice, but a message from me to anyone who's struggling with CFS and chronic fatigue syndrome and other related symptoms is that you both can get well, it's possible, and you will get well because you have it in you. It's not unequally sort of given out the ability to recover. Everybody can. I wish that for everyone. And for the people who are in the program, keep at it, you know? Even when it feels like nothing's happening and you're even getting worse and you can't believe that you're doing this stupid thing and whatever, just keep on going. Was it Churchill who said, if you're going through hell, keep going? And so that's my message. That's
fantastic.
what I'd like to say.
Thank you so much. Look, I really appreciate your wisdom and your insights, and I thank you for sharing your story. You know, I'm always incredibly inspired, and I find it, you know, I mean, what a cool thing to come out the other side of your whole life, your whole youth, yeah, and come out with a big smile on your face, and for someone to share their story the way you have as an introvert, I mean, you know, that's really saying, you know, good on you.
Yeah.
So thank you,
Dan.
Thank you for sharing and being an inspiration to others.
I'm just so grateful for being able to be on this side of the screen, and yeah, it's thanks to you.
No worries.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.